Good evening. Hello, everybody. Okay. Music. Let's see here. Okay. So, yesterday was an exciting day because it was the start of a new large project that is only sort of semi-related to the game. Well, it is strongly related to it, but it's not, you know, only for the game. So this is going to be a thing that will be generally useful and largely independent of the game. But we're going to be making use of it a lot in the game. I'm talking about a new user interface toolkit, and or specifically a new user interface protocol and a toolkit implementation of that protocol. The project is named Alloy, and yesterday I spent the time implementing the first part of its core protocol, namely the focus control. So we wrote most of this file here, and I explained the concepts behind it and how I design protocols, and we went into some talk about design and documentation and things like that. Earlier today, I went back and actually tested things. So I looked at what I implemented worked. There were some bugs, as expected, a few problems, and a few things that I factored out. But overall, it worked pretty well. So I also added a test directory, which now has actual unit tests and behavior tests for all the components I've implemented so far. There's about 100 tests, small tests in here, and they all pass. And I was really, really happy to see that for almost all of the tests I added, they always just passed immediately without me having to fix anything. The only real fix I had to do beyond getting things to run at all was with deep focus stealing. So when you have a structure that's nested deeply for... let me actually just show you the structure. Alloy. Alloy. Just real quick, describe tree. That didn't work. Describe root is what I want. There we go. So, for instance, if we have this kind of structure, so we have a focus list, and then an element, and another list with other things in it, and a list, and a list, and a focus element, nested in this way. The problem was that if I now decide to select this one, this element that's deep within it, it did a weak focus on, or a strong focus on this, and it updated the focus list, but this focus list itself was not actually weakly selected. Neither was this one, which is an invariant that should be upheld, so that wherever the currently focused element is, all the parents along the ancestry should also be weakly selected, so that the focus flow follows correctly. And that was not a difficult fix when the focus tree or a focus chain receives a notice focus of a strong focus, we simply loop through all the parents until we arrive at the root and set those to weak. And that does everything. So that was not a difficult fix, thanks to all the other parts where I spent time ensuring that these invariants are upheld. And so yeah, everything seems to be working just fine as expected. And I'm really happy about that. But today we're not really going to be looking more at the focus stuff. I talked enough about that yesterday. Today we're going to be looking at another component of this which is the layouting. But before I do that, I quickly wanted to show you just what the notes look like when I design things. So this is what I have in front of me when I'm typing this stuff out. So it's literally just a paper with lots of scribbles and lots of things struck out and rewritten, and it's a mess, but it really helps
That's so organized.
to do designs on paper first, so you can, you know, make some flowcharts, make some notes, and then rewrite them quickly and do things willy-nilly. Typing things out on the computer just feels much too restricted for quick design work. Okay. So...
I mean that sincerely. My notes are way messier with little drawings in between things.
Okay, well that's fine. I mean, this was one of my cleaner things. What else do I have here? Because I already had a good idea of what I was doing. Let me just quickly show you another one that's way messier. Hold on. Actually, how should I do this? Yeah. Quickly gotta send a photo to myself.
I am holding on with anticipation.
Well, you shouldn't. It's not that exciting. I think this was a note paper on Forge, my build system that I should also do at some point. Oh no, things are... You're not gonna see that real quick. Gonna switch away from that. Where is it? There you go. Didn't want you to see my private messages. There, that's a lot messier. A lot of thoughts and things scribbled around. It's also written in sort of a shorthand thing, so I have no idea what I even wrote anymore. I cannot decipher this for the most part. So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I'm probably gonna have to start anew anyway once I return to that project. I think I wrote that like a year ago or more. Okay, anyway, we're here for layout stuff in Alloy. Alrighty, so similar to the focus tree...
So you need a degree in cryptography to decipher this?
No, you need a degree in computer science. Duh. So similar to the focus tree, the component in the layout, or the component itself that we have, does not actually hold any properties about its layouting behavior either. This is all specified in the layout tree itself. The reason for that is, again, because the component can be part of multiple layouts at the same time, meaning that there's no way to really associate layout properties directly with the component instance. So we're going to be having a very similar structure to the focus tree here. We're going to be starting with a layout element. So we have a class for the layout element, which is an element. We have a class for a layout entry, again very similar to the focus tree. Layout entry is a layout element and it has a component associated with it. Let's just get that out of the way. And we have a layout. Which is a container. Actually, I'm gonna make that a container without specifying what kind for now. And we have a root layout. Right. So this is, if we look at the focus tree, this is extremely similar. So in the focus tree, we'd also had the focus element, we had a focus entry for a specific component, we had a focus chain for a multitude of layout elements, which is here the layout itself, and finally we had a focus tree, which is sort of the root of everything. Okay. I'm not sure if I'd like the names right now. I might need to change that. Maybe it should be layout container instead of root layout. Yeah. Maybe that's better. So this needs to be elements table. And here we have again a very similar function to what we had in the focus tree, which retrieves us the associated component entry for a component or element. So this is going to be layout entry. I don't like these names. I'm gonna have to think of better ones. For the layout element itself, we have an extent, or I'm not sure if I should call it extent or bounds. The extent should define both the location in XY and the size and width and height. But I'm not quite sure yet. Whether I should call it bounds or extent. In any case, you have that, and again, as before, we have a parent pointer, since this is going to be a tree structure. Okay. Finally, we have parts of the drawing API in here, which I'm actually, this is the drawing API is the one thing I'm the least certain about. So yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna leave that for later. Let me get something that's not just nothing. Okay. Maybe also the soundtrack is really quiet, so I'm gonna up it a bit. There we go. Okay. What is happening out there? this point, I'm also not sure what to do about the extent, as in how to store it. Whether it should be... whether I should use a vector library, or if I should leave it generic. Or, like, provide some kind of standard implementation. Reason being that depending on another library might be bad for extensibility. I don't know. Let me look at my notes again for a bit. I'm just gonna... I don't know. I don't know. Maybe this is the proper way to go after all. Wait, what? Hold on for a sec. What am I doing wrong? Oh, I have too many parents. There we go. Too many parents. Story of my life. Right. Hit this one. this into its own file as well. Okay. Just for shits and giggles. So in case you don't know, compiler macros are a lesser known part of the common Lisp system that allow you to control, well, they allow you to define macros for functions, if that makes any sense. So the compiler is allowed to ignore compiler macros, but typically useful compilers will expand them if possible. Typically, a compiler macro is useful for doing constant folding. So if you have some kind of operation that you know you can do ahead of time, if the argument is constant, then you can use a compiler macro to do this expansion at compile time and expand into a function that only accepts already expanded arguments, so you don't need to coerce at runtime. Most famously, this is used in the CL-PPCRE library, the Perl-compatible regular expression library for Common Lisp, which uses compiler macros to detect constant arguments to its matcher functions. And so if you pass a constant regular expression to it, it'll do the compilation of that regular expression at compile time, and at runtime you'll have an efficiently compiled function available to do the matching with. So it doesn't need to parse and compile the regex at runtime. And that happens very much the way it happens here. Like this. So we can actually take a look at this. Make extent 0 xy 1.0. So, oh wait, that's not quite correct yet. Of course. So if I expand this now, you can see it expands it into the make extent function, and these two values, because it knows they're constant, it turns them into a load time value form. This load time value form is evaluated at load time, and the result of that form is put into the place of that expression, meaning that at actual runtime, when this is executed, this is literally just 0.0, the float type. For the other ones, it goes back to doing a runtime coercion. So that bypasses the minimal, the really, really tiny performance cost of having to coerce the numbers into floats. Really not necessary for this at all. I just thought it was fun. Okay. Right. Should probably actually make these optional. What is the problem here? Okay. Okay. There's a couple of things we still need to do for the protocol. This one is much slimmer because it is a lot of the actual behavior that we're interested in is not in anything that we can define right now, but it's rather up to the actual layout manager implementation. So that's gonna be later. Right, so still need to do a couple of things. Namely, we need to actually ensure that the element is added to the parent. And here we're again gonna do sort of a kludge where... are we going to do a kludge? Not actually sure. No. So the parent can be nil, which makes sense for the top level thing. Okay. Here we're gonna have again a root link. Actually, yes. I really need to find better names. Are you going to make this a commercial release game? Ask Glass of Ethanol. Yes, I hope to at some point. I have no idea if I'm going to get to a point where it is actually sellable, but I definitely wouldn't mind if I were actually able to sell it. But that's still a long ways off. So for the time being, things are free and open source, and I think the engine and everything associated with it is going to remain open source. It's just the sort of game content that's going to be kept behind a restricted license. Once I actually get to a point where I have content. It would be nice to have a game written in Common Lisp in the market in the next year plus. Well, it's not going to be in the next year, but at some point maybe. Who knows? I estimate it's going to take me at least 3 years from this point to get to something that looks respectable, given that I still have other duties to tend to, and given that I tend to get distracted and there's a lot to do. Okay. Well, I'll be around to watch the stream until release. Woof! Well, we'll see about that. I don't think I can keep this up for that long, though. I might be able to do this until mid-September when the semester starts again, but after that, I don't think I can keep that up. Right. We're also gonna do the root link here again. I get you. Well, I hope at some point in my lifetime it's complete. Yeah, I very much hope so as well. This is the first time I've been making games for a long time. It's kind of how I got into the programming stuff in the first place. And especially as a kid, I used to make tons of really shitty games in GameMaker, and it's been a thing that I've wanted to do for as long as I can remember, literally. This is the first time that I've really taken a look at it seriously, not just as a one-off thing or as a sort of this would be kind of cool to do. But I know all too well how easily I get distracted, so I don't know if I can honestly keep this up for as long as I need to. I think I'm gonna call this layout root after all.
My antivirus tells me I can't pull Leaf because Git LFS might be evil.
What kind of antivirus do you have?
A thing provided by my ISP. F-Secure network security thing. Of course I easily could just allow Git LFS to run.
Okay. Honestly, on Windows, I don't know if using anything beyond Microsoft Security Essential is a good idea anymore these days. With that one, I've never had any issues.
I know, I've been meaning to drop this thing. Had it for as long as my ISP internet sub.
How long is that? 30 years? Could probably just copy this stuff.
Since sometime at the end of last decade, I think, since student apartments provided free nets. Before the company merged with another anyways.
Wow. Yeah, this is... I don't like these names. What to name this instead of layout route?
Mostly, I just pulled Leaf to take a look at the move to code.
Oh, yeah, sure. How have you been going ahead with your progress on the physics for trial, by the way? I guess I'll just call it layout tree as well.
I have a class for making more complex shapes, but it lacks collision resolving and I need some way to draw the point constraints with lines or something.
Well, drawing the lines isn't too difficult. The move to stuff does some line drawing. It's annoying currently, I'm afraid to say, but it's not too bad. Yeah, sorry. There should really be easier ways of doing everything. Okay. What else do we need to do? Oh, some checks, of course. What? Please undo. What the fuck? Why are you not undoing? Oh my god. Anything else? Okay. Yeah, this is pretty much just the same as before, minus the focus pointer management stuff. Yeah. Not sure why I call it that. Okay. What we still need to do, though, is a part of the protocol that's curiously missing from my notes here, which makes me doubt that I properly thought this through. Namely the problem of propagating layout changes upwards. And yeah, hold on, I had something here that I completely forgot about. Where is that? I remember. Yes, okay, right. I had some stuff that I completely overlooked until now. Oops. Okay. Since the layout stuff actually has some correlation with the rendering, unlike the focus, we do have to start working on rendering stuff. So I'm gonna call this renderable. And the renderable has a slot that tells you whether it needs to be repainted. Or repaint needed peep. Another thing that I kind of thought about briefly is multi-threaded, but that will make everything so infinitely more complicated that I don't think it's worth to even think about it. Namely, like allowing you to change the layout or the focus tier or whatever from multiple threads at the same time, and that would just be a huge headache. So I'm not even gonna bother. Because I also don't really think it's that useful. I don't see... Whoa. Holy shit. Sorry about that. Yanked on my microphone cable accidentally. Yeah, it doesn't seem that useful because there's not really much to be gained from that kind of parallelism. It's not like you need to change your stuff that quickly, typically. So it's fine to push it through a serialization point. Whoops. one thing, another problem is sort of this question of repaint needed P. So typically UI toolkits don't work at a constant frame rate, but rather they only update when necessary. Meaning that widgets need to tell whether they're dirty or not and need a repaint or a re-render. So there needs to be two ways of traversing the layout tree. One of them being saying that you actually do want to render everything, and the other one being sort of a maybe render thing, where you should only render things that are necessary to be rendered. And so I'm wondering whether I should call the maybe render thing just render and the other one like an explicit render exclamation mark or something, but that's kind of unnatural in this. The reason why I don't really want to call this maybe render is because I'm afraid that people will use the wrong function. Nah, it's still better to use maybe render. Okay. Also, I named this file the wrong thing. Yeah, okay. So now we have a couple of things more to handle in this stuff. So the idea of the renderer is to be a very generic protocol for something that can actually display the UI in some remote form. And as part of that process, there needs to be several things that need to happen. So the way this needs to be used, the idea is that first you create a first you create your layouts in whatever manner you deem necessary. Or first you create your components and then your layouts and whatever, and then your renderer. And once you've created your renderer, you need to call register on each component that you want to draw. So on each renderable. And so we're actually, I guess, on each component. Or is it? Let me think. No, I'm trying to remember. And this register call then causes the renderer to be able to allocate certain parts, certain resources that might be needed. to draw that renderable. So that might be like fonts or other kinds of things, whatever might be necessary. And then once you've called register on all the things you want to render, you call allocate on the renderer, and then from thenceforth forward you can simply call maybe render or render depending on your use case, and it'll draw the things with that renderer. And once you're done, just call deallocate to get rid of the resources again. Okay, so now that we have that, we actually need to add a couple of methods for our current layout implementation here to tie things together. So first, when we have a layout, we're gonna be calling, or when we have a layout entry, and we register that. We're always also gonna register the components that we associated with. Similarly for the layout, when we do that, we go through all of the children and register those. This also means that the component needs to be a renderable, and the layout element needs to be a renderable as well. So actually, component needs to be a renderable. Okay. We can also add a maybe render method. So the idea behind the maybe render thing is that we traverse the entire rendering tree, and if you ever hit a node that is dirty and needs to be repainted, we switch to using render for that part of the tree. And that always ensures that even if we only have a parent node that's dirty, we still are going to repaint everything, which is pretty much always what you want to happen anyway. Doesn't make much sense to me to redraw a parent but not the children. It seems weird. Okay. Which means we also need to add maybe render methods here. And similarly for the layout itself. Here we can also add a render method with default is going to be to just render the component and not have any other logic for the element itself. Now you may be wondering why we have this third argument of the UI here. The UI is going to be, we haven't defined that yet, but that's sort of the top level structure that combines a root layout and a focus tree. And the reason we need that as an argument is so that we can actually check the extents of a component and the current focus of a component in the UI. So when we call render component renderer, the component doesn't have any of that information, so we need to provide a way of making that possible, and that's by passing this UI argument here. Okay. Let me see. Right. And here again for the renderer method, similarly we're just gonna call render. Okay. Add a method here. And of course the register. The reason we're not providing a default method for register is because what actually happens on registering a particular kind of element or renderable is up to the rendering engine itself. And if we hit a point where that's not provided for, that's likely a bug, so we want it to error at that point. So we're not going to add a default method that does nothing. Okay. I think this, we need to have a register here though. Whoops, that's one argument too many. Okay. That's the rendering protocol done. To add that. What else? The only thing that's lacking now is a way of notifying the parent if there has been a change in constraints. So I think we're gonna do a notify extents function similar to the focus tree. Or notice extents, I guess. Again, there's nothing we can provide for default implementation here. That's going to be up to the layout manager in effect. Can provide a method here. I wonder if extents should be mutable. That might be interesting. Because then we could always ensure that notice extent is signaled, but I don't think that's a good idea, because if the layout itself needs to actually adapt the extents, it shouldn't create a notice extent call. Yeah, we're gonna leave it mutable. But we're gonna provide an implementation here. I also forget to copying the things across. Okay. That should hook that up as well. I wonder whether I should add convenience functions for width and height and things like that. I don't know. I'm not gonna do it for now. Just because I'm not sure if it's... it's a pretty safe bet. Yeah, let's do it. Where's the extent? go. Could also add a convenience function here to bind them. Or convenience macro. Hmm. Hmm. Or actually, no. Bad. I'm a dumbass. I'm sort of procrastinating but in code right now. If that makes any sense. I'm just making side things that aren't really important. Okay. So the structure extent allows you to specify variables for x, y, width, and height through keyword arguments. And only if you do actually specify anything at all for those does it actually emit a binding for them. Otherwise it does not. So you can do, for instance, this, and it'll expand into this rather than trying to bind everything. This has the advantage of if you don't need a binding, it's automatically ignored because it doesn't exist, and it doesn't squander potential resources fetching the value and so forth. So this is a a very clean implementation of that macro. Cheaper implementations will be less clean. Or cheaper in terms of easier to implement, I guess. Though this isn't terribly bad either. Okay. So we have that. That's pretty cool, I guess. Yeah. All right. I think that's everything from this part.
In my opinion, simple destructuring using macros is one of the best parts of Lisp. It's such a useful feature.
Yeah. A lot of there's a lot of like whenever you read entries by Lisp advocates or whatever, most of the time they try to advertise huge features like build your own domain-specific languages directly in there, or any kind of construct you need you can add with macros and what have you. But typically, in day-to-day use, macros are very scarcely written, and those that are typically very simple comparatively to what you can do. And yeah, if there's anything more complicated, you usually just have one singular library for that one macro you want to provide, and that's it. But yeah, most things are pretty simple, like an iteration thingy. Like here, in container here, I have a do elements thing, which is just a wrapper for a call with elements. You know, stuff like that. Actually, do elements is not correct yet. It needs a block. There we go. That's better. Okay. I am fairly sure this is the entirety of the layout protocol as it stands right now. Naturally, this is not very interesting because it doesn't actually do any layouting at all. The renderer also is not very interesting at the moment because there's no real API to make use of it generically. I do have an API for that sort of in the works as well. Where's my other notepaper? This isn't it. This is it. But I haven't thought about it further, and I feel like I need to before I get to that. So I'll try to do that tomorrow during the day, so we can get to implementing that. Yeah. So I guess I'm gonna wrap this up by implementing the last part of the protocol, and then maybe the most trivial of layout managers as well, so that we get a taste of that, because otherwise we're almost done with this. Okay, let's do that then. So the UI is sort of just an aggregate structure that holds the layout tree and the focus tree. And then it has a couple of functions that should make things more easy. And it's getting dark in my room, so I can't read my notes anymore. It's also getting hot again. I think I'll open the window. It's cooled down today, which is really nice. I was very happy. I could actually stream some video games during the day. which I hadn't been able to do for a long time. It's nicely cool. Raining outside too. Good. Nice. Yeah. Only you could feel it through the stream. Though I guess if that were the case, you would also have to feel the heat. So never mind that. Okay. Right, we're gonna have an extent for... and a focus for... and then... Alright, we didn't even touch the event propagation stuff at all. That's also a thing that needs to be done. But that too, I think I need to think about a bit more. Okay. So these are a couple of cheap functions. Whoa, whoa. So these are just going to be cheap delegate functions. Provide ease of access during rendering. What else do we need? Need a handle method. Oh wait, rendering was first, right? Did I implement that correctly? I feel like I didn't. Layout. Yeah, I didn't. Whoops. Yeah, the renderer needs to come first so that the specialization applies properly. Okay. This was for. There's an activate generic function listed for the UI, but I don't remember what exactly it does. I think it just ensures that render needed P is T or something. Or repaint. It shouldn't be called repaint, honestly. Okay. Okay. Right, so not that. That should also be called different. Walk for render, yeah. That tree itself is not a renderable, okay. Okay. Ha ha ha. Alright, that should have everything for that. Alright, on to implementing the first layout. And I'm getting a hiccup. Great.
Hiccups are better than hick downs.
What are hick downs? I think there needs to be
Hiccup, hic down. It's a pun, smiley face.
I know, I chose to ignore your joke. Responding seriously to bad jokes is one of my pastimes. I feel like there should be a method for enter and leave on components directly, so it automatically constructs the appropriate layout entry, so that we can actually store the interesting information about the layouting in the entry. I think I'm going to do that. So we're gonna add a default method on leave. Also add this on the focus tree. No focus
Is
chain.
it just me or your opening and closing parentheses rendered at different heights?
What? I don't quite understand what you're talking about. I genuinely don't understand your question, sorry. Fucking mosquitoes now. God damn it. That's the one problem with rain in summer and lights. All the insects are gonna swarm into your room. I think we can also provide a standard enter method for this. Or actually, this is gonna be...
The opening parentheses seem to be a few pixels higher on the screen than the closing parentheses on the same line.
Oh. That's possible? I never noticed. Might be part of the font. Probably is. Yeah, I never noticed that. Interesting. Yeah, I never noticed. Weird. Typically, you know, I work at this kind of font size rather than this. Wait, what is? Oh, right. I'm not gonna do that though, because typically you do want to associate extra information here, unlike with the focus tree where you almost never want to do that. So, whoops. Okay. I'm also, yeah, I need to rethink the layout stuff. I'm noticing some problems that I haven't worked out yet. Mostly, when you do a batch insert, or, you know, inserts across a long line, you typically want to be able to inhibit layout recomputations because they can be expensive until you're done manipulating the contents of the layout. So there needs to be both a way of inhibiting that and explicitly requesting a relayouting of all the components, of all the elements within the layout. So yeah, I also need to think about the consistency of how this stuff happens. Maybe a layout entry is a layout element, so it already has an extent. Oh, never mind, I don't need that. Or, well, that can't be bad. So the idea here is with this fixed layout that you pass... I'm way off on my keyboard. That you pass XY width and height when you enter the component, and that whenever the component tries to change, it always forces back the extent that you clarified onto it. We also need an update method. Actually, can we do this here as well? Probably also have... this. That should work. Okay. Good. I think that should handle this layout. It's really, really simple. No. Question is, so since the layout itself is also an element, it has an extent, and so the question is, what should happen with the extent of the layout itself? Should it try and force the extents of its components or its children within the extent of the layout itself, or should the extent of the layout expand to fit those of the children? That is the current question. Because I can see either way working. I think I'm gonna just leave it, which is neater. I don't know. Yeah, I need to think about this stuff again. I'm not sure enough to really put anything to code right now. That's bothersome. I hope I get some time to do this tomorrow. We're gonna get a new cat tomorrow, so it's gonna be a busy day, I imagine. Yeah, I need to think about this. I'm not sure. So, because it's late and I'm bad at doing that on stream, I think I'm gonna actually call it here. Anything else I could do would be a mistake or just a very rough beginning. So, yeah, early finish. Hopefully by tomorrow I'll have it figured out, what I want to do with the layout mechanism specifically. And we can start on implementing a rendering API that is more useful than the bare minimum we put down today.
Alright, thank you for streaming this.
And once we have that, we can actually see about, well, visualizing some things already. Exciting. Right, so I have, actually, let me note this down before I forget again. So I need to, where's my pens? There it is. Okay, so there's 3 things I need to think about again, in the very least. Layout recalculation, how that exactly propagates and what the constraints are there. I still need to rethink the event system a bit, or, well, I need to just write it down in a more concrete way than it is in my head right now. And then I also need to finalize the renderer API some more. And once I have that, we can finish the protocol implementation or protocol in the very least, I hope. Okay, but that's tomorrow. Let me just commit what I have. Implement layout protocol. Okay. I'm probably also gonna, during the day, if I find the time, I'm gonna add further tests for what I implemented today. And yeah. Again, if you're, would appreciate it if people made their own thoughts about UI toolkits and how they're structured and how they should work and how they could work, and so that we can have a bit of a discussion, because yeah, I get a bit antsy when it's only my thoughts, because I feel like I'm missing something, or I may be making bad assumptions and stuff like that. Anyway, thank you as always very much for sticking around, watching me code, being in chat, and all that. I really do appreciate it. I know I say that every time now, but it's true. I really do. Alright. That's it. See you guys tomorrow.